And today I'm going to be talking about Cletus Kasady, aka Carnage, the villain in Venom 2. If you have not seen Venom 2, this video is full of spoilers. I'm going to be talking about both what I see in the movies and what I learned about Cletus's backstory. Before I dive into what I saw in the movie, I want to give a little bit of backstory on Cletus Kasady and how he became the villain. Trigger warning. We are going to be talking about a lot of really dark things here, as most comic things do. We're going to be talking about abuse, physical abuse, as well as emotional abuse. And, you know, there's going to be some violence discussed because Venom, after all, definitely bites heads off. Only the bad guys. But, you know, I got this information from marvel.fandom.com. The link for that will be in the show description, direct to the passage if you want to dive in and learn more. Cletus Kasady. Let's start literally at the beginning. This backstory is not mentioned in the movie Venom 2, but it is an interesting backstory. And even if we don't reference Carnage from the Venom 2 movie, there's a lot to pull from both Carnage and Cletus Kasady. So Cletus Kasady was born in the Ravencroft Institute. He was born to a woman who had paranoid schizophrenia. Not long after he was born, she ended up dying. After his mother passed away, he was put in the custody of a very abusive old woman. This woman may have been his biological grandmother. We don't know for sure. She was an abusive old woman. Well, what happens when an abusive old woman is tied with a mentally unstable child? The old woman gets pushed down the stairs and subsequently dies. He's then put in the custody of a couple who could possibly be his biological father and stepmother, or he could be just a random foster family that he was placed with. This couple was also just as abusive as the old lady, if not more so. There's a lot of things that happened, but essentially the man in the relationship ended up murdering the woman, whether it was by accident protecting Cletus or while he was abusing Cletus and she got caught up in the middle. We don't know for sure. What we do know is that she ended up dead. He got put on trial. Cletus did not speak up for him and therefore he was executed. So already let's look at this through the lens of Cletus Kasady. Homie's been through a lot. He was born to a mother who had mental illness. And remember, this was also in a time where we took mental health even less seriously than we do today. So he was placed with this abusive woman, treated him like garbage. He lost it, pushed her down the stairs. He's in place with another abusive couple who could have been his biological father. His stepmother's now dead. His stepfather's now dead. What has he learned? The people that are supposed to be there to support him weren't. The people that were supposed to love and care for him also abused him. This actually, as we've learned, damages the brain and changes how we perceive reality. Again, this is not an excuse for what happens later when he does become a villain, but understanding the backstory really is important here, so bear with me. He was then sent to live in the St. Estes home for boys. He was bullied by both the other orphans and the staff. At some point within this time frame, he fell in love with a girl, as you know, young kids do. She rejected him, and he responded by pushing her in front of a bus. What would we do in today's day and age leading up to this point? Well, first, we would hopefully not have him in a situation where pushing a young girl in front of a bus would be possible. We'd probably take his issues more seriously and we would see that he needs help. I can't guarantee that he'd be treated well, but that girl would probably not have ended up in front of the bus. All of this builds up to the fact that he ended up a cannibalistic serial killer. It's very easy to become sucked into these stories and we just go, oh my gosh, they're terrible just because. But these heroes are supposed to be relatable for a reason. This, I truly believe, is supposed to be a message. The movies never follow the comic book exactly, if at all. So I'm going to go based off of what I saw in Venom 2. Cletus Kasady grew up in a very abusive family. His mom, his dad, and his grandma abused him continually, horrifically. Cletus lashes out and kills all three of them because why keep them alive? They hate him anyway. Throughout the entire movie, he is seen as this psychotic, unhinged villain, which, don't get me wrong, he most definitely is. I am in no way justifying or saying that it's a good thing what Cletus Kasady did. And in the movie, he ends up meeting this girl in some sort of institution that they're staying in. I believe it's St. Estes. She was forcefully taken because she was a mutant. See X-Men and all of that. He's with this girl. He watches this girl get taken. At this point, they don't see each other for years, but they never stop loving each other. She is placed in solitary confinement. He is placed in solitary confinement, but somehow in their mind, they're going to end up together someday. To cut the story short, however, Cletus Kasady wants Eddie Brock to tell his side of the story. Cletus Kasady has murdered tons of people and there's bodies strewn everywhere, but there are these crazy scribbles. Venom notices these crazy scribbles and ends up finding all of these bodies that people haven't been able to find for years since he's been in solitary confinement. He calls Eddie Brock again, calls him back in. He says things that infuriate Eddie, that infuriate Venom. Venom lashes out, and it ends up leading to Cletus Kasady biting Eddie Brock and therefore tasting the blood and ingesting the spawn of the Venom symbiote, which we know to be Carnage. Fast forward to the big finale fight at the end of the movie between Venom and Carnage, Eddie and Cletus Kasady. This was the thing that caused me to rethink the entire movie and want to dive into Cletus's story even more. Cletus asks Eddie, do you know why I'm so upset with you? And of course, Eddie, just trying to keep him talking, keep him distracted, asks why. Cletus says, I'm angry because you only told one side of the story. You never shared the side of the story. Everyone sees Cletus Kasady as this terrible human being and serial killer, and he killed his grandma and his mom and his dad. But no one talks about the fact that grandma and mommy and daddy all abused Cletus. That's when it hit me. And I'm not saying that this would have changed anything had anyone had the empathy to understand. And again, I'm not saying that what happened was okay, but he felt completely backed into a corner and his brain responded by going, well, no one cares about us anyway. May as well have some fun. And also throughout the movie, you see that Cletus is definitely not in his right mind. In fact, he's very childlike, and a child inside of an adult's body is dangerous. At one point, when he was still in an isolation cell, Cletus told Eddie Brock that people love serial killers. That one line, of course, we're supposed to see explosive and go, nobody loves a serial killer. But let's take a step back and think about that for a moment. True crime is extremely popular. Women make jokes all the time about how they are prepared to handle whatever situation because they're obsessed with serial killer documentaries. In his childlike brain, after killing his abusive family, yes, I do think it's still important to mention that they were abusive. He didn't kill just for the sake of killing at this point. He was retaliating in a way that he was taught with violence. So somehow through the grapevine, he found that if he was a serial killer, he got attention. If he was a serial killer, he got what he craved. Now, this is completely my own theory and is in no way backed up by what I read. We don't know a lot about the inner workings of Cletus's mind, at least what I could find. I truly believe that he was looking for love in the only way that he knew how. Based off of what I know of child psychology and what I've researched about trauma in the brain, it's not surprising that things happened the way that they did. This was, again, back during a time when we took mental health even less seriously than we do right now. So not only was this baby born to a mother with extreme mental illness, which I guarantee you was not supported in the way she could have been, should have been. So she was definitely not in her right mind, but also she died. And people don't think that babies remember this trauma, but there is a reality. The baby knows the body that it lived in for over 9 months. The baby is aware. The baby knows the voice, the feelings, the emotions. They're completely aware of what's going on in there. And so when that person is no longer there, that causes trauma to the baby's brain. And then leading up to being placed with all of these abusive people, again, he wasn't taken care of. Then he was put in an abusive home where he was bullied by both the kids and the staff. Once again, learning nobody cares, nobody loves me. So what can I do to get that love? When a child grows up in an abusive home, the brain does not develop correctly. The brain is taught that abuse equals love. The brain is taught that violence is how you get relief. There is a scene where Cletus Kasady walks into a gas station. There is a person behind the counter and there's a computer. Instead of jumping over the counter to get to the computer and just shoving the guy out of the way, he proceeds to brutally beat this man. It was incredibly hard to watch, especially knowing that this dude was completely innocent. The thing that stands out to me the most is the look on Cletus's face. After he beats this man, he takes a deep breath and his whole body relaxes before he gets on the computer to get the information that he wants. That right there reminds me of children who need sensory input. And once they get that input, they feel better. In that moment, what his brain had learned was that you can only get relief through physical release and taking it out on somebody else, especially when it's someone random. So you get all of that dopamine and serotonin, and it's really weird to think of beating someone and cause all those things. But when you grow up and you think that that's how you're supposed to do life, and that lives are expendable, because if you're expendable, they've got to be expendable too, it screws with you. At this point in time, Cletus Kasady was reacting in the only way his brain knew how. And his brain was stuck in childlike wonder and processing. Just like how children throw temper tantrums at the store, you'll see adults on Black Friday do the same thing, because that's what their brain reverts to. Am I comparing a crazy Karen at Black Friday to Cletus Kasady? Not always. No, I'm not. But we've got to be aware. Am I in any way justifying what Cletus Kasady did? Abso-freaking-lutely not. Am I in any way saying that it was a good thing that he beat the attendant because his body needed to process? Absolutely not. What I am saying is that this makes it abundantly clear that we are not doing a good job of taking care of children, of taking care of mental health in our society. Imagine if we got to the villain before they became a villain. Imagine how different those comics would be. And I'm really hoping that by now you can understand where I'm going with this. The phrase hurt people does ring true. Abusers don't become abusers just because they're born that way. I truly believe that abusers are made. They're created. They're not born with inherent villainy. There are some people that are born with certain traits that lean a certain way, that are obsessed with one thing or another, based on mental illness in the family, or just the fact that we're all human. We all have different tendencies. We all have different things that we can lean into. If our daddy was an alcoholic, the chances of us being an alcoholic is higher. If our daddy abused us, our chances of becoming an abuser increase. If our mom struggled with X, Y, and Z, we're more likely to struggle with X, Y, and Z. But here's the thing. I don't want us to have empathy without boundaries. Trauma is not an excuse at all for abuse. And I don't want anyone to ever think that I'm saying that that is the case. Every single one of the abusive relationships that I have been in, they all had a story, and their story broke my heart. I felt bad because his mom died and he just didn't know how to respect women. I was sad because his daddy abused him and beat him, and I wanted to be the person that was there for him. I felt bad because his parents never took him seriously and they treated him like garbage, and I didn't want to just be one more person that left him. And that thinking almost cost me my life. So don't get it twisted. I truly believe that if we don't get to the root of the problem, we're not going to see change. I don't want to just do reparations afterwards. I want to do preventative. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I want to instill worth in people. I want to instill the concept of consent. I want people to understand respect. I want kids to understand this to prevent the abusers from becoming abusers in the first place. But if we don't begin to understand how the abusers were created, we're never going to completely buck the system. We're never going to completely dismantle it. So how does this apply to real life then? What do we do? First, I truly believe that it begins at home. We do have to take responsibility for those that are in our care. For those of us who are taking care of kids, whether we are caregivers, whether we are teachers, whether we are parents, whether we are grandparents, foster parents, we have to realize the next generation is literally in our hands. The future, we have the power to change that. What does that look like? For me, I am fiercely protective of my son's autonomy. He is only 7 years old. He is not a doll to be pushed around. He is not required to hug anybody he doesn't want to. He doesn't have to share everything. Why? Because he's allowed to have his space and his things. I also am just as adamant about how he treats other people. You don't touch bodies without permission. You don't just hug somebody without asking them. I'm teaching this to him so that way he understands that he is allowed to say no and he doesn't have to allow anyone to touch him. We do have open communication where if anything does happen, he's allowed to talk to me about it and there's no judgment. A huge part of what creates the villains, a huge part of what creates abusers is the lack of support in mental health. Not trying to harm anybody in particular, but statistically, males abuse, particularly physically, more than women do. This is for a variety of reasons. But again, society creates the abuser. Men are taught that women are their property. Men are taught that we are there for their pleasure. Men are also taught that they're not allowed to feel their feelings. Men are taught entitlement. Men are taught that getting someone, that racking up the body count is a good thing. It's a sign of honor. while women are taught that it's shameful, that they shouldn't say no, and that it would just be better if they just get it over with, that it wouldn't be so bad if they would just say yes, and it wouldn't be so bad if they just sucked it up and got it over with. These messages affect everybody, regardless of gender. But we have to make sure that we are attacking the root of the problem. If we can get to the root of that tree and rip it up, pulling all the roots up with it, we would see a drastic decrease in the prevalence of abuse. And we would see a drastic increase of people wanting to step in and prevent the abuse from happening. We have learned that no one is coming to save us. People in charge are not interested in creating change. It is up to us to change the system. It is up to us as women to take radical responsibility to unlearn what we have learned. It is up to men to take radical responsibility and unlearn what they have learned. This is not about anybody being better or worse. It is about bucking the system that is harming us both. If things were different, if mental health was taken seriously, would Cletus Kasady have become a serial killer? Possibly. I don't know. There's no real way to know unless we wrote a different story. But what I do know is that if he was taught that he could get love and compassion without harming others, and that he was a human being who mattered, I don't think he would be so interested in being cannibalistic. I know this is a really heavy topic to address, and I know that I kind of went on a lot longer than I was planning on, but this is really important. Imagine what would happen if we did rewrite the story, if we took the status quo and flipped it upside down and demanded a different story. I truly believe that is the only way that we are ever going to create lasting change. Until that happens, I will still be here supporting survivors every single step of the way. Did you like this style of video? Did you like the fact that I brought in the comic book stuff? If so, let me know. Also, is there a movie that you want me to talk about and dive deep into? Put it in the comments section. If you like these types of videos, I want to make more of them. If you are someone who is on the beginning of your recovery journey and you don't know where to start, check out this playlist right here. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and never forget that you are strong, you are capable, you are intelligent, and boo, you are so freaking worthy.